right, what's up, man? We're back on the Young Turks. I'm going with a lot of what's up today. So here's a story I'm a little conflicted on. Edward Snowden, the press is ripping him apart. Of course, I don't agree with that, although they are right on some of the issues here. Now, that's why, hence, conflicted. Jeffrey Toobin, who I believe is on CNN, but he wrote for The New Yorker that he was a grandiose narcissist who deserves to be in prison. And then Brokaw comes around, oh, he's a high school dropout, he's a military washout. Wait a minute, aren't you guys part of the press? Aren't you supposed to encourage whistleblowers or even leakers? Your job is to get information from the government, right? No, because they view their job as to protect the government. Now, Bob Schieffer is a guy that Michael Schur loves, and I kind of like it. He's an old school guy, and he's like grandpa, and I know he's a little set in his mainstream ways, but I root for him a little bit. But here, I think, unfortunately, he revealed himself to be very, very pro-establishment. Let's listen to his criticism of Snowden.
I like people who are willing to stand up to the government. As a reporter, it's my job to do that from time to time. Some of the people I admire most in the government, men and women who led the civil rights movement, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., they are true heroes. I'm not ready to put Edward Snowden in that category. For one thing, I don't remember Martin Luther King Jr. or Rosa Parks running off and hiding in China. The people who led the civil rights movement were willing to break the law and suffer the consequences. That's a little different than putting the nation's security at risk and running away.
Yeah, look, so Edward Snowden is not Martin Luther King. You win. Okay, but we all already knew that. So that's totally apples and oranges. I don't know why he brings that in there. And in a different part of that commentary, he talked about he knows a lot of the people in government and he likes a lot of the people in government. But, Bob, that's the problem, okay, is that you know those guys too well. And you think, these are my buddies. Don't reveal information about them. And I think you've totally lost track that your job is to challenge the government. Really, when's the last big time that Schieffer challenged the government? Or any of them on the talk shows did? It's all, you know, theater. All right, let's bring in the panel again. Casper, the friendly host, J.R. Jackson, the Reverend, Lee Fong, writes for The Nation. He's in San Francisco. Lee, I'm starting with you. Bob Schieffer, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty. You know, I think a lot of folks talk about bias in the media, but for me, the biggest bias isn't liberal or conservative or even partisan. A lot of these corporate media types, their biggest bias is, you know, a very close connection to the establishment, whether that's the big business community or the government, the NSA. That's what Schieffer's kind of exhibiting here, and that's, I think, the big problem if you look at the corporate media, whether that's CBS, NBC, whatever. And
so here, let me go to Axelrod, speaking of which. He's at MSNBC now. And this is a guy who was probably the closest advisor to the president. And the president even joked that, you know, MSNBC used to work for Axelrod when Axelrod was in the Obama administration. Now he works for MSNBC. So shockingly enough, it turns out he's protecting the Obama administration and is against Snowden. Let's watch.
I'm not going to confer hero status on a guy who is clearly not now just leaking information to make a point about civil liberties. He's leaking information that is meant to damage the U.S. intelligence gathering around the world, and that's really, aside from being a crime, you know, it's unforgivable.
So, guys, here's the thing, right? On the one hand, I can't tell Schieffer and Axelrod apart. Like they've merged, the government and the media have become one entity, and you're not sure where one starts and the other one stops. On the other hand, Axelrod is onto something in what I've been saying throughout the show and actually throughout all of last week. The shish about the China and and what we're doing to Russia, et cetera.
Yeah, so, like in that particular quote, I think Axelrod actually makes a decent point. I don't think that Snowden is out there to destroy Americans. I think that he genuinely does care about civil liberties. But the thing about Schieffer that really kind of rubs me the wrong way is his argument didn't make any sense at all. So he's saying, oh, look at Snowden. He leaks all this information, then he runs away. Well, what do you expect him to do? Stay here and get the Bradley Manning treatment?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he's going to run away because he's not going to want to face the dire consequences of being tortured and imprisoned for trying to protect our civil liberties and our freedoms.
And it's really easy for Schieffer to say that because he's in his comfortable studio.
Exactly.
And he would never take the risk that Snowden and Manning did Or, by the way, I think Glenn Greenwald did in publishing the article, because he doesn't want the Bradley Manning treatment.
Well,
he doesn't want to run away to China.
Exactly.
He's very comfortable. That's why he doesn't challenge the government.
So can I have a slight, I guess, defense of Schieffer? Because, yeah, I mean, I think he went over the top, but I think he was seeing some over-the-top rhetoric about Snowden already. When he compared him to Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, we are kind of exalting this guy to the biggest hero of our time type of status, comparing him to people, to the most famous whistleblowers that changed big things. And we're still finding out exactly what all he has and what he's been saying and what he's been doing. So I still am on the ship of let's find out everything first before we have our final decision on the guy. But so when he gave the King comparison, the civil rights leaders were fighting for our civil liberties, a certain segment of the population's civil liberties. And no, they couldn't escape to another country. Maybe some would have if they wanted to. But they took a dip. There was punishment laid out, you know, and that's part of why it's such a deification of certain people, because it takes that much courage. I'm not saying he should have stayed around. We talked about it before. I'm not sure if I would have done it, because you know the consequences. Maybe we're cowards because of it. I don't know. But that changes a certain level of your
I would argue that
deification.
I understand that running away makes it seem like he's not as courageous, but at the same time, considering the U.S. treatment of whistleblowers, considering the fact that he left a very cushy job in Hawaii and a very, very hot girlfriend at that, might I add, okay, I think that he's pretty damn courageous. And he's going to face consequences. I know that he's in Hong Kong right now, but I know that eventually they're going to find him and they're going to extradite him to the U.S., which then, you know, he'll be tortured and imprisoned.
And by the way, you know, if you were Bradley Manning, would you now, in hindsight, wouldn't you have run away? Yeah. I mean, right? He's been in prison for all this time. He barely just 3 years later, barely his trial just got started, and solitary confinement for 9 months, which is a form of torture, as Anna was alluding to. So maybe he should have run away too. Look, before I get to Dick Cheney, I got to just say one thing that I said in the first segment. I really got to repeat here. Whether what the NSA is doing is bad or good or violates the Constitution or not is not tied into whether you like Snowden or not. Like, Snowden could turn out to be crazy. I don't care. And a part of the reason that the rest of the media attaches it to Snowden is that so they can say, aha, after we do a character assassination of Snowden, or maybe he does something wrong, then I can say, ignore what the government is doing. Because it's all about Snowden. It's not all about Snowden.
You've noticed he's labeled with the high school dropout thing, too. It's part of breaking down a character. So, I mean, whatever, what does a high school dropout mean? It just gives a negative click in our heads to think about him when you mention his name.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. It's not a substantive criticism of him. It's just to say, ha-ha, he's a bad guy.
Smear him. Exactly.
Yeah, oh, he's stupid. He's whatever it means, right? All right, now, speaking of stupid, I got to go to the Sith Lord. Dick Cheney. Yeah, I said stupid. Here he is on Snowden. Oh, here I am.
Traitor.
Yeah. No, we have the side, don't we? Go, let's watch.
I think he's a traitor. And I think it's one of the worst occasions in my memory of somebody with access to classified information doing enormous damage to the national security interests of the United States.
Lee, correct me if I'm wrong. Under that definition, wouldn't Dick Cheney be a traitor? Didn't he and Scooter Libby leak the name of Valerie Plame? You know, we never proved it against Cheney, partly because Scooter Libby obstructed an investigation. And then didn't Dick Cheney and George Bush fall out over this? They stopped making out because Dick Cheney's feelings were so hurt about the non-pardon of Scooter Libby, they just commuted his sentence. How does this traitor get off talking about traitors?
Those are all great points. I would just add that, you know, it's hard to trust Cheney because, you know, he came out and made kind of similar statements back in the day saying that, you know, torture made us so much safer, it prevented so many terrorist attacks, and then when folks in the media actually looked through those claims, they turned out to be false. So if anyone's actually helping the kind of public relations of, or the public image of Snowden, it's Cheney here.
Yeah, in fact, he says that. Now, this is the graphic. He said in a Q&A session today, Snowden said, being called a traitor by Dick Cheney is the highest honor you can give an American. And the more panic talk we hear from people like him, the better off we all are. If they had taught us a class on how to be a kind of a citizen Dick Cheney worries about, I would have finished high school. I like that. So, I mean, do we have to say anything more? Cheney's a dick. And him, like, the minute Cheney says somebody's a bad guy, I think, oh, wait a minute, I got to rethink. He must be a really good guy. So, no, okay, you know what? Final thing on this. Isn't it amazing that the press still pays attention to Cheney? Like, it's like a big deal when Cheney says something.
Really, the only thing I was curious about hearing him in that interview saying was what his defense, because we knew he was going to defend the program, the spying program overall anyway. I was just curious as to how he would get to that point, but still not say, but I like what the Obama administration is doing, because he can't do that either, even though it's exactly what he would like for them to do. And he still somehow wheels it away to it.
Yeah, he did. In the rest of the interview, Cheney's like, I totally agree with the NSA spying. Good job, Obama. I hate Obama. He's wrong on everything else. IRS, Benghazi, other words. I hate him. So it's never good enough for Cheney. Okay.